Reading Aristotle or any other ancient Greek text in general poses a challenge for us, perhaps on two levels. The primary challenge is coming into grips with Aristotle's terminology, and the second challenge is working our way through the philosophical ideas he proposes and their implications. Therefore, it seems that the most logical way to analyze Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics is to understand the terms he uses. As C.D.C. Reeve points out in the preface of his translation of Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, when reading Aristotle, we need to keep in mind that Politikê isn't quite politics, epistêmê isn't quite science, praxis isn't quite action, theôria isn't quite theory, Eudaimonia isn't quite happiness, aretê isn't quite virtue. Even what the ethics is about isn't quite ethics. One of the most crucial, if not the most crucial, concept in Nicomachean Ethics is eudaimonia, or happiness. By understanding this concept, we can make our way through Aristotle's text and come into grips with his other philosophical concepts and thoughts. The first thing that we need to be aware of is that happiness is not an exact translation of eudaimonia. Eudaimonia is almost always translated as happiness, but this translation can easily give a misleading impression. Happiness in English suggests a feeling of one kind or another, perhaps a feeling of contentment, or delight, or pleasure. Aristotle makes it quite clear that he does not have any such feeling in mind at all. It might be a good idea to look over the literal translation of the word and consider some of Aristotle's own definitions of the concept instead. When people are asked why they do something or what they want in life, everyone might answer differently. For instance, they study because they want to find a suitable job in the future, and they want to work because they want to make money, and so on. However, things such as money, bodily pleasures, or even higher things such as honor, understanding, and virtue are not an end. We can still continue asking why they want such things. The final answer we reach has to do with eudaimonia. We want happiness because it is not like these other things we mentioned. They are means, and they are not the ultimate goal. They are not an end. In contrast to this, eudaimonia is the ultimate goal we want to reach. It is true that we could choose honor, pleasure, understanding, and every virtue, though we do not choose them because of themselves as well. But the difference is that we could also choose them for the sake of happiness, supposing that because of them we shall be happy. Happiness, on the other hand, no one chooses for the sake of these things or because of anything else in general. It is important to see the practical side of Nicomachean Ethics. Aristotle's ethics is not only about theoretical contemplations. This is why he writes about people's reasons for doing something. For instance, he recognizes that the good we look for in actions is indeed different in different actions and different crafts. The good which might be in medicine could be a different good from that which is to be found in generalship or other things. We could say that in medicine this good is health, in generalship victory, in building a house and in other crafts something else, and in every action and deliberate choice it is the end, since it is for the sake of the end that everyone does the rest of the actions. So if there is some end of all the things doable in action, this will be the good doable in action. And if there are more than one, it will be these. What is noteworthy about this is its practical dimension, which shows how for Aristotle, ethics does not solely concern itself with theories. We can confirm this by what Aristotle himself writes. The present work is not undertaken for the sake of theoretical knowledge, as our others are. For we are engaging in the investigation not in order to know what virtue is, but in order to become good people, since otherwise there would be nothing of benefit in it. We must investigate what relates to actions, that is, in what way they are to be done, for actions also control what sorts of states will come about. It is in the third book that Aristotle examines actions much more closely. He divides actions into voluntary and involuntary actions. It is interesting how Aristotle treats involuntary actions. According to Aristotle, what is involuntary seems to be what comes about by force or because of ignorance. Also, what is forced is what has an external starting point. That is, the sort of starting point where the agent, or the one being affected, contributes nothing. However, the distinction made between voluntary and involuntary actions is not irrelevant to the situation which gave rise to them. This is so because there are mixed actions which we cannot decisively say whether they are voluntary or not, and they subsequently give rise to much dispute about the nature of these actions in order to figure out under which category they belong. Both voluntary and involuntary, then, should be ascribed with reference to the time at which the agent does these actions. That is why we read at the beginning of the third book that it is perhaps necessary for those who are investigating issues relating to virtue to make some determinations about what is voluntary and what involuntary. The situation might get yet more complicated when we are dealing with involuntary actions. It is true that, in general, people praise or blame those actions which are voluntary, and they pity those actions which are involuntary. But the retrospective attitude that a person employs when he realizes that he has committed an involuntary action is also important for Aristotle. If a person who has acted in ignorance shows remorse and regrets, his actions which were carried out in ignorance faces a different situation than a person who does not regret his actions. Aristotle points out that a person who regrets his actions has acted involuntarily. However, while a person who does not regret his actions has not acted voluntarily, we could neither say that he has acted contra-voluntarily. Furthermore, we should be able to recognize what kind of ignorance is involved in the action. There are two kinds of ignorance: acting because of ignorance and acting in ignorance. Only ignorance of the particulars in which the action lies and with which it is concerned can be the cause of involuntary actions which promotes pity and sympathetic consideration.